Fiancée demanded a costly trip. I refused. She ruined our party. Her broke parents begged me back. Hey there, folks, let me tell you my story about what's been going on with me and my gal Emily, and it's been a wild ride, let me tell you. My pushy fiancée up and demanded that I shell out cash for a lavish vacation, and when I said no way, she went and wrecked our engagement bash, so I had to call it quits with her right then and there. Now her folks are pleading with me to take her back, and here I am, a 25-year-old guy who's been with Emily, a 24-year-old woman, for 2 whole years. We got introduced by some buddies who thought we'd hit it off on a blind date, and sure enough, we clicked right away. We started going steady not long after, and for the past year, we've been shacking up together too. I work as a software developer and bring in a pretty good paycheck, so I end up footing most of the bills in our relationship when it comes to money matters. Emily used to hustle in sales, but she's out of work at the moment since she quit a couple of weeks back to chase a business school dream, and her parents are footing that bill, so I'm not sweating that part, but living together means I'm now stuck covering all the home costs by myself. The only things she can chip in for right now are gas and groceries, though she says that won't last long according to her plan. I was okay with handling it all because I figured once she's back on track, we'd split things evenly again, and plus, I loved her and trusted her, so it didn't bother me much. I'd been dreaming about popping the question for ages because I thought we were meant for each other, and I was itching to tie the knot with her as quick as possible. Last week, I finally bought a ring and asked her to marry me, and she said yes with a big smile. We were on cloud 9 for a few days and started setting up a party to let all our friends and family know we were engaged. We threw that party a few days ago, and that's when everything hit the fan, I tell you. Before I get into the mess, let me just say this was the first time I saw this greedy side of Emily, and I had no idea she could be so caught up in fancy stuff. We invited all our pals and loved ones to the shindig, and I was chatting it up with my folks when, after about an hour, Emily yanked me away, saying she had something super important to talk about, so I followed her to the bedroom, thinking it'd be just us, but her whole crew of girlfriends was waiting there. To give you the rundown, Emily and her high school gal pals, about 6 of them including her, have been tight since back in the day, and they all share this irritating attitude, except for her. I don't mean to come off like I hate women, but Emily's nothing like her buddies, and I'm still puzzled how she ended up with that crowd. The other gals are spoiled rotten, sassy, and loaded with cash, while Emily's parents were never wealthy, just comfortable, not nearly as well off as her friends' folks, but she didn't seem to care, and it looked like her pals didn't mind either, so I figured it was all good between them, I guess. I didn't catch on to their little group dynamics until lately. Anyway, I felt a bit scared seeing them all parked in the room, and I was already jittery when Emily started saying they'd been chatting and wanted a bachelorette getaway before the wedding. I let out a relieved breath and told her I was fine with it, that she could do what she pleased since my buddies and I might have a bachelor party too before the big day, nothing wild, just fair for her to have fun with her crew before we said I do. But turns out, that wasn't the whole story. After I gave the okay for her party, she said it was awesome because she wanted me to bankroll it, not just for her, but for all her friends too. They were dreaming of a week at some far-off beach spot, staying in a swanky hotel and living it up, but since she's jobless right now, she couldn't swing it without draining her savings, and she couldn't ask her parents to pitch in because they're already paying for business school and she didn't want to burden them too much. So, she asked me to cover it and promised she'd pay me back once she landed a job. All her friends were staring me down, and I felt uneasy because it seemed like she'd put me on the spot asking for cash in front of them. I ran the numbers in my head, though I didn't need to because I already knew it'd cost a fortune, and there's no way I could handle it without dipping into my savings. I really didn't want to do that because I didn't see the point in throwing so much money at a trip I wouldn't even join, and even if they asked me to come along, I wouldn't want to foot the whole bill. I wasn't being cheap, just thinking ahead, knowing that kind of cash could help in a pinch or just day-to-day life, and even though it was awkward, I had to say no and let her know I wasn't up for paying for their trip. Another reason was that it might take her forever to save up to repay me, and I didn't want to get tangled in some messy money deal right before we got hitched. The second I turned her down, she and her friends gave me these weird looks and asked why she couldn't go, so I explained that she could go if she found another way to pay, but I wasn't cool with shelling out that much for a bachelorette trip. Then she insisted she'd pay me back eventually, but I told her it didn't matter because I'd be out a ton of cash until she did, especially since she wanted me to fund it for all her friends, not just her, and that was way more than I could handle. So, unless she could pay for it herself, she'd have to scrap the plan. After that, I walked out because I didn't feel right talking money with her pals hanging around. I figured she'd let it go once I left since we had a house full of guests, but she didn't and followed me to the living room, still yammering about the trip. She was dead set on it and kept saying she'd pay me back, but she just needed me to do this one favor and support her. She even said she and her friends had been plotting this for years, and since she'd be the first to get married, it had to be a big deal for all of them. So, I told her this was supposed to be a big deal for us too, and if I paid for their trip, I'd be flat broke by the wedding, and we'd have to settle for a courthouse ceremony. That wasn't totally true because my folks were chipping in for some wedding costs, but she didn't need to know, and I'd still be on the hook for what they didn't cover. I just wanted her to drop the trip talk because it was a crazy idea that made no sense to me. She kept arguing with me in low voices, and nothing I said could stop her. We tried keeping it quiet so no one would overhear, but we both got riled up, and our guests started noticing. After a while, I suggested we pause the fight and chat later after the party, but she lost her cool and threw a full-on fit right in the middle of everything. She hollered at me, calling me selfish, saying it was just a trip I should pay for, that I make enough to handle it, and the only reason I wouldn't was because I'm too stingy. She had a breakdown, crying that she and her friends always wanted an amazing bachelorette trip before tying the knot and going their separate ways, but I was wrecking that dream by being self-absorbed and tight-fisted. By then, I was pretty upset, so I shouted back, pointing out how I'd been the one keeping us afloat for the past year since I knew her salary couldn't match mine for the bills, and now, with her heading to business school, I was ready to take on all the home expenses just so she could follow her dreams, and if she still thought I was selfish, maybe she shouldn't be with me because I didn't want to be with her after that outburst. After what she said, she burst into tears and bolted out of the house, and soon after, all the guests started heading out. Her parents said sorry for her actions before they left, but the harm was done. I couldn't sleep a wink that night, hoping Emily would call or text, but she didn't do a thing. The next day, I heard from her parents, not her, and they urged me to talk to her and bring her home. They mentioned there's this odd pressure from her friends where she's always trying to keep up with them, and they'd seen this kind of thing before back in school, thinking she'd outgrow it and stop pretending to be someone she's not, but clearly that hasn't happened, and because her friends are rich and made some dumb plans when they were kids, she felt compelled to prove her life was just as glamorous, even planning a fully paid trip for them. Her parents said her friends could likely afford to fund a bachelorette trip for all 6 of them since their folks have deep pockets, but Emily and none of us could, and sadly, she was too proud to admit to her friends she couldn't swing a fancy trip right now, just wanting to blend in with them, which has always been her thing and got way out of control this time, risking our relationship because of her weird need to show off wealth or something. They said they talked to Emily, but she's not ready to say sorry because she's still hurting from the night before, and now they're begging me to reach out and get her back because she's holed up in a hotel, which she'll eventually ask them to pay for since she can't afford it long term, and they're kind of relying on me to support her financially while she's in business school and earns her degree, so a breakup would spell trouble for her and them. Plus, they think it's not worth letting a small spat ruin our bond. They said she's hesitant to return because of my comment about not wanting to be with her, and it hit her hard. They talked to her, and she didn't even mention the trip stuff, just seemed crushed by what I said, feeling like ending things was a big call I made on a whim without chasing her down or talking after. She's got a point there, but I was expecting her to reach out since she kicked off the fight and lost it first, so I don't think it's crazy for me to want her to come talk and clear the air. The fight was mostly her doing because she was acting nuts about the trip, and it was pretty bold of her to assume I'd not only back her through business school but also cave to every whim she had just because she wanted it. I mean, I've got my own life too, and my money isn't just for her desires. I need to watch out for myself because, unlike her, I don't feel okay asking my parents for help, and I don't want to lean on anyone else. I still want to patch things up with her because, aside from this mess, Emily's been the best partner I've ever had, and I really want to stay with her, but I don't think I messed up during our fight that day. I said I'd end it when she threw that tantrum at our party, and that's where we stand. Update 1. So, I decided to reach out to Emily, not to say sorry or jump back in, but to get a clear picture of where we're headed after this. A lot of you said I should hightail it and split because that blow-up at the party was a major warning sign, and I reckon you're right, but I can't walk away from this without at least talking it out. I need to figure out what went down and what broke us so I can decide if we can fix it or if I've got to let go. I appreciate all the advice from folks commenting, but honestly, no one knows our relationship like we do, and my gut's telling me I need to talk to her, so that's my plan. I sent her a text this morning. It's been about a week since she left, and her parents have been texting me non-stop, pushing me to take her back. She hasn't answered yet, and I was half tempted to swing by the hotel she's staying at. Her parents told me where she is so I could visit if I wanted, but I think that'd be over the top. It might seem like a big romantic move, but if she's still mad, it could feel creepy, and I don't want to risk that, so I'll stick to texting and wait for her to respond. I sent her that old "we need to talk" message, and she probably knows it won't be a fun chat. Like most couples, Emily and I have had our share of spats, but nothing this big. None of our arguments ever got to breaking up because we always wanted to make it work and stick together. This is the first time one of us moved out and went silent for more than 2 days. Usually, when we'd fight, we'd patch things up in a couple of days because it's tough to live together and not talk, but after she left, she didn't reach out once, so I had to break the silence, I suppose. I'm rambling because I'm nervous about what's coming. She might end it or force me to walk away, and I really don't want that because, even with things rough now, she's the best girlfriend I've ever had, and I love her. Update 2. So, Emily finally got back to me with a text, and I think we'll need to meet face to face to sort this out. She wrote that she wants to make it work, but she saw my post online and might read this update too, and she didn't like the picture of herself it painted. She meant she didn't like that side of her that showed up, and she owned up to it fully. I didn't expect that, but it's nice she admitted her mistake. She said she'd rather not hash it out over the phone and thinks meeting in person makes more sense, so that's what we're doing. We're meeting for lunch tomorrow. She's driving to my workplace, and we'll hit a nearby restaurant so I can get back to work quick, which was real thoughtful of her, and I appreciate it, but I'm still unsure if we'll work things out and stay together or just call it quits. She didn't sound too cheerful in her texts, so I'm in the dark about what to expect. Her parents have stopped contacting me, and that doesn't feel good because I'm pretty sure it means they've thrown in the towel, and if they have, maybe they don't want us back together, or maybe they just don't care anymore. Either way. Even if we split, I think it's better we meet one last time, talk it over, and part on better terms than letting that party fight be our last word. I think we deserve that, and a lot of you on this subreddit think it's done because her actions were out of line, and I agree. What she pulled at the party was downright foolish, but I don't want to give up, and I'd love to fix things and get married. It might sound dumb, but I know her, and aside from her shallow, silly friends' influence, she's a real sweet person. It's just that she's been trying to keep up with the wrong crowd, and that's what set her off. It was the first time, and I don't think she'd have yelled at me like that without her friends planting dumb ideas in her head instead of steering her right, and it was partly her fault for listening to them over her own sense. So, yeah, despite all this, I think we should stick together. We could try couples counseling if needed, but we should work hard to fix this instead of giving up. I don't believe in walking away from relationships, and I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but I really want to make it work. Update 3. We met today, and sadly, it's over. I don't know what I was hoping for or why I thought we could pull through and stay together. I was a fool to believe that. She handed back the ring and said she'd return in a couple of days to pick up her stuff, which is an understatement because she left almost everything behind. I didn't ask where she's staying now. I figure she's got friends or others to help her out. It stinks that we're done, and I won't wake up to her face every day anymore. I hate ending relationships, and this was hands down my best one, so I'm heartbroken it's finishing. The talk we had wasn't easy. She said she read my first post here but skipped the updates because she already knew the score, and more than that, she couldn't face reading them because the first one was tough enough, knowing it was about her. She said seeing how I felt opened her eyes to some hard truths, like she's been drifting through life without much purpose. She wants to stop depending on me or her parents and start building something real for herself. She also said she's grateful for all I've done and was willing to do, and though it's weird to thank me, she wanted to, and I just smiled, though looking back, I probably should have said something. Turns out her friends aren't as shallow and mean as I figured because after the party, they told her she needed to apologize and make it right if she wanted us to last, saying she overstepped with her words and even pointed out the money gap between her family and theirs, assuring her they wouldn't judge if she couldn't keep up and were even ready to help out, but she had to drop the ego trip and stop overreaching, especially at her age. I was surprised her friends noticed her issues and stepped in, but I'm glad they did, and I guess I misjudged them. Anyway, the main thing is we're done, but at least we parted on good terms. We hugged goodbye before splitting up. I held it together while we were together, but once I got back to the office, I had to step out to the restroom to let my emotions out. I don't know if we'll ever get back together, but if we do, I hope it's soon, and I hope we make it work that time.